Hi everyone. Okay, yeah, this is a talk about careers in pen testing, basically. What's involved, what's good about being a pen tester, what might not be so good. It's not really a kind of recruitment talk. We have a graduate recruitment program, which I will mention, but it's not a talk entirely aimed at making you come and work for NCC Group. I'll sort of cover the sort of nature of the job, but also some kind of stories about the types of assessment, the types of jobs that we do. So firstly, I'm Richard Turnbull, a principal consultant. I've been working for NCC Group since 2010. I'm based in Edinburgh. We've got an office up in York Place in the centre. I've only recently moved up to Edinburgh. I was down south for quite a lot of years. Our main offices are in Leatherhead in Surrey and in Manchester, so Edinburgh's only a small office at the moment, but we're sort of trying to build up our presence in Scotland. I specialise in application security. Cryptography is probably my main speciality. I also do a lot of code review, mobile application assessments, web application stuff. But, I mean, a big variety, which is, well, part of being a pen tester is coping with all types of different technologies. Many years ago, I started by doing a maths degree at Edinburgh University down the road, and then I joined CESG, which is the government information security branch, as a mathematician on their graduate scheme. Didn't do much maths there, more sort of software security, product security assessments and so on for a few years at CESG. And then I went to join NTAC, which is another government body. Now that team is responsible for helping police with sort of hard forensics cases, especially those involving cryptography. So my job there was doing kind of digital forensics, cryptography, password cracking, reverse engineering of cryptography products. So that was great fun for a little while. Then when I left there, I decided to move into the private sector, joined NCC Group in 2010, so been there ever since. Right, quickly, terminology. Pen testers are people who test pens. No. There's lots of different terms for the same job, basically. Penetration tester, ethical hacker, security consultant. I don't really care which term people use. Some people get very kind of worried about what the exact meaning of all these different words is. It's not important to me, and I'll probably use them interchangeably through the talk. As far as I'm concerned, these people are those who perform sort of technical assessments trying to find vulnerabilities and weaknesses in IT systems. Right, so what do pen testers actually do? I mean, in terms of our day-to-day work, security assessments and consultancy for all kinds of different clients. You know, we have lots of private sector clients, public sector clients, government, local government, national government, some classified jobs. We work on a wide variety of projects. Sometimes they're just one day long. Sometimes they're ongoing things that might last for more than a year. Sometimes we'll work on a job by ourselves. Sometimes in a small team of 3 or 4. Quite a lot of the work we do is remote, so we're either working from an office or quite a lot of people spend a lot of time working from home. Sometimes we're working on site with clients. So there's a real kind of variety of work. It's not really possible to kind of give a picture of a typical day or week or month. Normally the way it works is that we will do an assessment, write a report for that assessment and pass it on to our client and move on basically, and often that's it as regards that particular assessment. Sometimes we'll go back and test it again and see if they've fixed any vulnerabilities that we've found, or sometimes we have more kind of ongoing things where we do regular work, but a lot of the time it really is just pitch up, do an assessment and on to the next one. So why might you want to become a pen tester? I've got a kind of list of the good points about this job. I like it, which is why I've been doing it for quite a few years. Next slide, I'll cover some of the, it's all sweetness, not all sweetness and light. Next slide, I'll cover some of the reasons why pen testing's not for everyone. But I mean, first and most importantly, it's I think it's fun. You turn up, look at a new system, and try and hack it. Basically, I'm guessing the reason that you guys are doing this kind of course here is because you must at least agree with that sentiment to some extent. So that's one of the main drivers. There's a real variety of work. You get to see all kinds of different technologies, different systems, working with all the different clients. You get to know just a lot about how things work all across the IT sector and all kinds of sectors, really. So if you find that kind of thing interesting, then that's ideal. A lot of projects are pretty interesting, not all of them, but you get to work on some sort of interesting cutting-edge stuff. Sometimes some things you work on are not earth-shatteringly important, but others are important systems that are major use across the world. The extent to which you can do research depends on your employer, really, but certainly at NCC Group we've got lots of opportunity to do, get time set aside to do research in areas that interest us. And if you look at our website, you'll see there's all kinds of sort of white papers and vulnerabilities that are released. It's a great way to sort of stay part of the InfoSec community, attending conferences, and just the very fact of working for a company where everybody is kind of technical and on the same wavelength as you. I mean, one of the things we find is we've got a distribution list with all of our consultants, across the UK, but also in Europe and the US. So basically, any question you have about anything sort of information security related, if you send it to that distro list, somebody will answer you in extraordinary depth. Travel, get to go to some interesting places. There's lots of opportunity for overseas work. That's for a lot of people. That's something that attracts them to the job. Money, I mean, it's quite it's quite a well-paid job. If you get to the point where you're a billable consultant, then you're going to be paid accordingly. That's quite simply the way it works. People who have a degree in some kind of information security discipline are not going to struggle to find a good job. So I'm not saying this is the only way to make any money. And equally, most pen testers don't have the kind of mentality where they are entirely motivated by money, but it is a reasonably well-paid job. So that's good. Right, pen testing is absolutely not for everyone. So a couple of these bullets are copied from the previous slide. So variety of work isn't for everyone. But if you can find yourself spread quite thinly as a pen tester. You work in one thing one week and then something else the next week, and you'll sort of develop great breadth of knowledge, but not necessarily depth. So if you're somebody who prefers to sort of get right into one particular area, then probably not pen testing. Travel is not always good if it's excessive, and I'd sort of couple that with the sort of uncertain schedule that we often have, and that, quite often on a Friday you don't really know where you're going to be on a Monday. So those two things don't always make for the best work-life balance. If you're young, free and single, then those things don't normally cause you a problem, but for some people it can be a bit of an issue. You have to wear a consultancy hat as a pen tester, so that means being nice to clients and that kind of thing. It's not all just about finding bugs. So if for those who just want a very deep technical job without any real kind of outside influence, then it's not ideal. Sometimes we have to work in data centers, which is almost in itself a reason not to become a pen tester. They're not very nice places to work. It's okay if you have to go there occasionally and you can just live with it, but never mind. Waiting for creds, that's the kind of bane of the pen tester's life. That's basically, you're ready to start an assessment on a Monday morning. The client has promised you username and password to log on to the web application, whatever you're testing, and come Tuesday afternoon, you're still waiting for them. And that bullet point is intended to sort of catch all the kind of different little frustrations to do with pen testing. But I mean, what job doesn't have its own little frustrations? Alongside waiting for creds, we've got the jokes about we're pen testers, so we shouldn't need credentials, which is pretty funny the first 15 times you hear it, and then not so much. One thing that, as time goes on, systems are getting more secure, so we find fewer exciting vulnerabilities. That's not to say we don't find any, and it very much depends on what type of thing you're looking at. Like tomorrow I'm starting a job where I'm reviewing a PHP web application, so I'm hoping for some good stuff. If it was .NET, then I wouldn't be so excited. So if you're expecting that every job you're just going to come along and tear something apart and find 15 critical vulnerabilities, then maybe that was true in 2003, but not so much now. Okay, so that's some of the pros and cons of being a pen tester. Just to give you a sort of flavour of some of the sort of variety of work we do, it's going to talk about our what we call M&A assessments. That's mergers and acquisitions. So a couple of our big clients, when they're buying another company, they hire us to do part of what they call technical due diligence. So basically they want us to do a very kind of intense, focused security review of that company's products. So we call it a white box assessment. We'll get given access to that company's entire source code repository and all their kind of digital assets, and they want us to find out in double quick time what the sort of security posture of that company is. Just basically give them an idea of whether the products are secure or not. So these kind of jobs vary massively in terms of their scope and complexity. Some of the companies that we've done these assessments on are definitely companies you'd have heard of, possibly use the products of. Some of them are much smaller. Sometimes they're just buying little startups where there's not so much going on. So how would we approach doing this kind of review? Maybe with 2 or 3 of us in 2 weeks. There's literally millions of lines of source code to potentially to look at. They might be unfamiliar technologies. Well, we start with threat modeling. I don't know if people get any experience with that, or if it's covered in your courses, but that's kind of, we don't necessarily do it in a very formal way, but we at least use the product a bit, think about how it works, think where it could be attacked from, and we use that to sort of prioritize what areas of the product we're going to look at, because with large things we're never going to be able to cover everything. It's just unworkable. So we kind of prioritize the most apparently most security critical areas of the application. We take a sort of a sampling approach where we don't look at, if there's 20 different pages in an application that do roughly the same thing, then we'll maybe just look at a couple of them, given that we can assume that other ones might behave similarly. We use some automated scanning tools a bit. They don't form a sort of large part of our methodology. Pen testers tend to be a little bit sort of cynical about automated tools because it's a very different approach to sort of manual pen testing. The reality is that both of those approaches have their own benefits. We get a lot of benefit out of what we call grey box testing. So a white box assessment where we've got the source code and the documentation and everything. Black box is where you're just plugged in and testing dynamically. Grey box is where you combine those two approaches. So that's definitely something that allows us to kind of cover things quickly. You can do some sort of black box testing to try and identify some interesting areas and then go and refer to the source code to see what's actually going on. And you can complement that by sort of looking at the source code, thinking, this looks a bit dodgy, then go and test out your sort of hypotheses on the actual system. So that helps a lot. Working from first principles, in the sense that IT systems tend to have the same kind of vulnerabilities and issues to look for. So even if it's a system that's using unfamiliar technologies or isn't something you've really seen before, you can normally apply sort of knowledge of previous similar things to try and work out where to look. And that's kind of referring to it as sense of smell. Basically, when you've been doing this for a long time, you can just normally look at things and kind of work out what the most interesting areas to look at are going to be. So just to quickly kind of mention some of the things that we tend to find. I mean, there's lots of very boring things that we find all the time in these jobs, but there's some more interesting things that are sometimes a little bit surprising. SQL injection is not surprising. I mean, it's a very well-known vulnerability, but the sort of interesting thing with this we find is that developers seem to know how to avoid SQL injection now. It's a very well understood problem. Everybody knows this is what you do to make sure your database queries are secure. Yet we very frequently find SQL injection in these jobs, and the reason for that is that we find that lots and lots of systems, 98, 99% of their database accesses are secure, but there's usually a few that are done in a different way. And particularly when we've got the source code for the application, then we can find those, and a SQL injection bug is a SQL injection bug, even if it's only one area of the application that's vulnerable. This is another classic one. Lots of systems have got outdated libraries or other components that have got vulnerabilities in them, and that's often an easy way of attacking something. And it's very easy to say to people, well, make sure you keep these things up to date, but if you've got 50 or 100 different third-party components in a system, it's not actually that easy to keep things updated, so that's why we keep finding this problem over and over again. We always find passwords, keys in source code or in config files. Sometimes that's because there isn't a better way for the product to do it, but often it's just a little bit of laziness. Not often, for example, in Windows, you can use something called DPAPI to encrypt the contents of a config file. It's quite an easy thing to do, but people don't always do it, so that's something we find all the time. Cross-site scripting, I've said, from unexpected sources, so basically not your classic cross-site scripting where you send a request and there's no input validation and something comes back in the response. It's more data that's coming from other areas, so perhaps an application that's presenting logs to an administrator. If you can somehow inject some script into a log that will later on be read, or we've seen vulnerabilities like this where it's a system that's displaying the contents of packets off the network. So if you just send a packet with some JavaScript in it, that will end up rendering in the user's browser. So a bit like SQL injection, where developers seem to have mostly got the message. They have mostly got the message with cross-site scripting when it's coming in the sort of classic sense, but when data's coming from other places, then we often find vulnerabilities. Pretty much any time that any system tries to do anything out of the ordinary with certificate validation, rather than using the sort of platform-provided methods, they mess it up. Sad but true. This is a bit like the DPAPI thing I was mentioning earlier. Increasingly lots of platforms offer really good security features, but products often just fail to make use of them. Which, it's an easy win to just make sure you're using the things that are given to you for free, but it doesn't always happen. Lots of products include kind of debug functions that they forget to turn off, or experimental functionality that they almost forget has been included in the live system, so that's another really sort of rich source of vulnerabilities. And often when people are talking about security of systems, they kind of say, oh, well, the weakest point is always where these systems interconnect, and which is kind of true, but also that's a very vague statement, and it's not often kind of qualified with any actual detail about what they mean. So in our experience, it's true, but what it tends to mean is network services listening on interfaces where they shouldn't be listening, and web services web services that are used to connect features just not having any proper security on them. So that's something where we find a lot of stuff. So that's a little diversion into some of the types of job we do. Back to pen testing. So there are certain sort of technology trends at the moment. There's lots of types of assessment and types of system that we're doing much more work on now than we were 2 or 3 years ago. So mention some of those now. it's no huge surprise. Obviously, cloud computing is becoming massive, but it's, there's a corresponding increase in the number of assessments we're doing. Particularly, lots of our clients are starting to move their IT online to Office 365. So we're looking at that a lot. A lot of, AWS isn't so new, but lots and lots of our clients are hosting things in AWS, and those are very different from a sort of pen testing point of view. Looking at these things is very different because it's all about how something's been configured and how the user has configured their permissions within their account. You don't tend to find actual vulnerability. AWS and Office 365 don't tend to have vulnerabilities themselves. I mean, it's of course possible that some can be found, but they keep, the vendor keeps everything up to date there, so it really is just checking that configuration best practice has been followed, as it were. We're doing lots of, CDO is what our acronym for cyber defense operations, so that's kind of incident response, malware analysis, forensics. We've got a growing team that do a lot of that work. A lot of it is kind of helping organisations with kind of readiness for plans for what's going to happen if they're compromised. We're doing a lot on SDLC, which is Secure Development Lifecycle, and DevOps stuff, so working with development teams to help them embed security into the development process, rather than them writing something and us testing at the end and then dropping a big pen test report on top of them. They want us to look at things as we go along, which is quite a big kind of cultural shift for pen testing organisations, because like I mentioned earlier, it's traditionally it's been turn up, do the job, move on to the next one. This is a little bit different in that it's kind of ongoing consultancy and assistance. We're doing lots of red team, social engineering, phishing engagements. They're pretty good fun. Quite enjoy reading the reports for those. Sometimes they're really quite large jobs where target an organisation do sort of open source sort of intelligence stuff, send phishing emails, try and escalate that to compromising machines and just seeing how far we can get. And there's a lot of interest from our clients in those at the moment. And yeah, like as I say, they're really fun to get involved with. A good buzzword coming up, Internet of Things, is pretty massive from a security point of view at the moment. I mean, one slight issue in terms of whether we do any work for them is that a lot of these companies developing these things are very small and don't really have a security budget, which is, where a lot of the problems are coming from in the first place. But if they don't have a security budget, they probably don't have a budget to hire security consulting firms to help them out. With the exception of the automotive sector, where we're doing lots and lots of work at the moment, because they're obviously much bigger companies that need to get security right for very obvious reasons. Lots of companies are interested in bring your own device at the moment, so sort of letting employees use their own mobile devices, and MDM, which is mobile device management. So basically systems that impose some kind of security on mobile devices are fairly, it's something we spend a lot of our time on at the moment. Single page web applications, by that I mean kind of JavaScript based things based on like Angular and Node and so on. We're seeing a lot of that, and it's, again, that's a bit of a cultural shift from the types of, lots of our guys are very, very experienced in web application testing with the normal kind of HTML model, whereas these types of applications work really quite differently. Lots of stuff's happening on the client side. Most of the communication with the servers over some kind of web service, so the types of vulnerabilities that are common are different there, and that's something that we're having to kind of cope with, and it's just going to get more and more popular. So next I want to talk about some of the sort of skills and attitudes that you need to be a successful pen tester. Now, this isn't the sort of recruitment kind of, well, you need to have a good technical background and information security. You know, the stuff that's kind of obvious, I'm not talking about here, but more the sort of additional things that help people succeed when they join a company like NCC Group. The first of those is knowledge of enterprise environments. Was anybody at Security conference? One of my colleagues, Gavin Holt, did a sort of keynote presentation there about pen testing Windows domains, and Gavin graduated from Abertay 3 or 4 years ago, I think, and works for us now. And he did a talk basically just saying this is how Windows domains work and what the security issues are, because this is something that we need to know, have a huge amount of experience of in real life pen testing, but it's not really something that was covered in a course. For obvious reasons, there's just not time to cover all that kind of stuff. But so yeah, how does a Windows domain fit together? How are Linux systems used sort of in the enterprise? Network architecture, how do firewalls and switches work? That kind of stuff. Well, people have to pick it up on the job, or ideally, if you know in advance, then that's good. That's why one of the routes into pen testing is through kind of sysadmin type work, and the great advantage that people coming from that background have is normally a pretty good ready-made understanding of all this. Okay, it helps to be able to write code. You don't have to, but if you can cobble together a script in Python, at least that can be useful in a lot of jobs. You need to be able to write reports. We spend, unfortunately, a lot of our time writing reports. You do the exciting bit, which is the pen test, then you have to write a report. And a lot of the time, we don't even meet our client face to face when we do a job. And so really, the report is all that they get. That is our deliverable to them. So it doesn't matter how good a job you've done finding vulnerabilities. If you can't sort of express that information in a report, then you might as well not have bothered, really. So that can often be a bit of a learning curve for new starters in the industry. And hand in hand with that is understanding the sort of business context of vulnerabilities and security issues. Which isn't, that's something, to a large extent, something that comes with experience, but it's important, again, something else that's a learning curve. You need to have a bit of patience for when you're sitting around waiting for credentials, and the other sort of frustrations that can come with moving from your university course and perhaps the sort of graduate program where you're spending all your time hacking things, basically. Then when you start doing real engagement, sometimes there's a bit of waiting around and some jobs where you don't find very much. So you have to have the patience to understand that it's not all finding critical bugs every day. You have to have a can-do attitude, because often on a Friday you'll be told next week you're doing a security assessment of this type of system. You might not know too much about it, but you just have to kind of be willing to sort of give it a go and get on with it, really. I was kind of hesitant about putting this in the slide. I don't mean cynicism in terms of your dealings with clients or colleagues or anything like that. Just it's a certain kind of attitude towards technology. You have to sort of assume that things are insecure and that you're going to find the problems that exist. I'll rephrase it to inquiring mind is maybe the more politically correct term. I think most people that come into the industry do probably have this mindset, but it's certainly something that's helpful. So to say these are things that are just useful kind of extra things on top of your degree or other kind of equivalent technical knowledge and your work ethic and all that. These are the sort of specialist things that we find are either often sort of difficult or maybe not present in people that are starting in the industry. So if you want to become a pen tester, who can you work for? There's lots of security consulting and pen testing firms. You can think of them on a spectrum. At one end, you've got very kind of corporate big four sort of consultancy firms. At the other, you've got small consultancy operations. NCC Group are somewhere in the middle. We started out probably as a boutique consultancy, and as time goes on, we get larger. We're moving more towards the sort of big four end. But there's a wide variety of firms in the UK that are doing this. Obviously, you don't have to work for a consultancy firm. You can work on in-house security for any number of companies. I suppose that's quite different in focus. Often you'll be more specialised in a particular area. That's either a good thing or a bad thing for you. It's not something I've done myself, so I'm not going to try and claim to know a lot about how that differs from pen testing. It's obviously a different kind of lifestyle in a way. You can work for yourself if you're really good at finding bugs. You can just make your living off bug bounties. You have to be pretty good to make a good living doing that, but pretty nice lifestyle if you can pull it off. Right, so I did say it's not a recruitment talk as such, but I'm going to mention our graduate recruitment program at NCC Group. It's actually in a number of different areas. I don't know if that grey one at the bottom is visible. It's not really for me. It says assurance sales. So if any of you want to become a salesperson, then we have a graduate program for that. But I mean, the main ones I talk about now are pen testing and cyber defence operations, which is as I said, the kind of incident response and forensics kind of stuff. So more detail on the program. We have 2 intakes every year in any of those 4 offices. So we don't offer the graduate program out of Edinburgh at the moment because it's just not a big enough office to have enough kind of people around to offer the support to graduates. We do some internships and placements. So during that program, says you've got a mentor and support from management. We've got lots of challenges in our training network where we try and teach people about the various technologies. You get involved in shadowing and real projects, and yeah, I have no idea why we say on these slides that there's an exam at the end. Is that something going to put people off? But it's the unfortunate reality at the end. You have an exam to see how you've got on. If you're interested in applying, it's based around this challenge, this ninja challenge that we have. So there's a sort of sequence of, it's basically a sort of capture the flag type thing, so you can register there and have a go at the challenges, and that's the kind of route into the program. So I think if people get to the end of that challenge, then they're guaranteed an interview. Some other challenges that aren't actually part of our program, obviously, but are just useful to sort of learn and kind of the same kind of thing that you might encounter in the Ninja Challenge are those things there. Right, so another kind of, this is a story about a sort of particular assessment I was involved with a little while ago. I know there's a bit of a forensics focus on the courses here, so this one combines kind of crypto and forensics, and it was quite good fun actually. So one time I was in the Manchester office and I was literally just walking past and what are you doing here? Right, okay, you know something about crypto and forensics, come here. So one of our clients had been in touch saying, all right, we use TrueCrypt full disk encryption on our laptops. People heard of TrueCrypt? Open source disk crypto that's, well, pretty secure, except something very weird happened to it about 3 years ago where the developers just pulled the plug on it, and with a very weird kind of message, and nobody really knows what was going on. But anyway, people still think it's secure. Our client thought it was secure because they were using it to protect their laptops. So this was somebody's, at the company's laptop. The screen had got broken, or so there's some problem with the screen, so the IT department had said, right, what we'll do is we'll take the drive out of this laptop, put it in a new one temporarily, give it back to you so we can fix the screen in your existing one, then we'll switch it back over at the end, blah, blah, blah. But something went wrong. During that process, the thing wouldn't boot anymore. There's lots of business critical data on this laptop, not backed up because nobody backs up their laptops. So this is a pretty bad situation for them. They couldn't get this data off the laptop because it was TrueCrypt encrypted. Something had gone wrong, to say it wouldn't boot. They'd tried various things with, when you encrypt a laptop with TrueCrypt, you have to create this recovery disk where they store various things to help you out of exactly this type of situation. So they tried using the recovery disk, that hadn't helped. They gave it to a data recovery firm, so not a kind of security firm, but a firm who offer a service where they actually just recover data at the raw level. So that firm had taken the drive. They said, okay, well, we can image it fine. There's no problem with the actual disk at the physical level, but all the data on here looks encrypted and there's nothing we can do with it, I'm afraid. And they told us, right, the problem here is not that we don't know the password. We know what the password is to unlock this drive, and I was thinking, yeah, right, but they did know the password. That really wasn't the problem. So we said, okay, well, we'll have a go. Send us the image of the drive and tell us exactly what you did with it. What's the timeline here for what's happened with this drive. So this, like I said, when you encrypt a laptop with TrueCrypt, it asks you to create this recovery disk, which is a CD. They burn copies of the various bits of metadata that TrueCrypt puts in the drive, get burnt to that CD so that you can restore them back at the end. You still need the password to do that, but it's intended to kind of defend against corruption of the drive. So options 2, 3, and 4 there are to do with writing stuff back to the disk that you've got in the drive. Option 1 is, in theory, you tell it the password and there's code on that disk that will just go through and decrypt the whole drive. So, I mean, that's quite a kind of daunting sort of command line type menu to be confronted with when you think, oh no, this laptop's gone to hell, and I need to do something with it. So if people don't really know exactly what they're doing, then it's not that obvious what all these options do. But basically, what they said was, well, we took this disk and we tried, option 1 to decrypt the drive, and it didn't help. It still wouldn't boot after we did that, even though we put in the right password, it was the right recovery disk. It ran through at the end, said it decrypted the drive, but it still wouldn't boot. So then, well, we thought, oh, and we just kept trying tried all the options again, all the things off the disk, and nothing. And that's when they sent it to the data recovery firm, and that's when it eventually ended up coming to us. So we're kind of looking through this timeline and thought, right, sort of analysing what they said they'd done when, and basically it sounded like they might have run option 1 twice. So in terms of cryptography, what happens if you decrypt something twice with a symmetric algorithm? Does anybody any thoughts on what you're going to end up with? No, well, somebody said rubbish, which is pretty much what you do end up with. It's a symmetric operation. So you can, if you have some ciphertext and you decrypt it once, you get back to the plain text. If you decrypt it again, that's basically just running the cipher again. So you end up with something that looks like ciphertext, because it is, in a sense, ciphertext. I got myself really confused with the terminology when I was trying to talk about this, which is why this sort of the plain text is a ciphertext kind of title. It all gets quite confusing, but it basically sounded like that might be what they'd done. So what we'd need to do to get back to the original data would be to use the password which they told us to recover the disk encryption key from the drive, and then, given that something had been encrypted and then decrypted once, which would have taken it back to the correct data, then decrypted again, we need to encrypt it to get back to the original unaltered state. Now, the TrueCrypt recovery disk, for fairly obvious reasons, doesn't give you the option to re-encrypt things, so we had to write our own code to do it. So if anyone's interested, it's on GitHub. It's just a little utility to process TrueCrypt encrypted data, and you can give it an option telling it to run the encryption in the wrong direction. So this worked in the end. I'm sort of skipping over a lot of faffing around we had to do, basically, where we spent ages with trying to decrypt it with the wrong key, like ages, because we'd taken some data from the wrong sector in the drive, spent ages trying to do it, and then realised that we'd take it from the wrong sector, took it from the right one, and then first time it worked. Getting into a little bit of forensics, so we successfully decrypted the drive. We're like, right, brilliant, got a decrypted image, loaded it into, I think it was FTK, one of the big forensics tools, just said, nah, this isn't, I can't parse this file system, which was a bit alarming. So we looked at it in more detail. Don't know if you did any sort of file system analysis in the courses here, but in the NTFS file system, you get the master file table, and the first 4 entries in that table, for some reason, were just completely corrupted. It wasn't anything to do with the processing that we'd kind of done, because there's 2 copies of that table, just completely different parts of the drive, and they were both messed up in exactly the same way, so there's no way it was something that we'd done. I think this was probably the reason why the laptop wasn't booting in the first place. So it was still something we had to sort out. So luckily, the laptop had been recently hibernated, so we were able to pull the hibernation file off the image, which hadn't been damaged, and then there's a toolkit called Volatility, which I don't know if anyone's used. It's a sort of memory analysis toolkit. We're able to use that to decompress the hibernation file. So that takes you back to memory image, and then those missing MFT entries were in memory at the time the laptop had been hibernated, so we were able to sort of grab them from there, patch them back into the original image, and then everything worked. And our client was very happy. Right, so that's all I was going to cover. If anyone's got any questions, got a bit of time to answer them.
As an employee and as a company, what are your success metrics? I mean, how do you justify your existence in your annual review? And how does your company justify their invoices?
Justify to our clients? Yeah, it's an interesting question, I suppose. We're a consultancy firm, and our clients, I suppose, have their own kind of, they decide that they want to have a security assessment performed, so it's kind of up to them to make a judgment on whether they consider our services to be valuable to them, really. That's difficult. It's a kind of intangible thing. I mean, I don't think they're judging us or other pen testing companies on the exact number of vulnerabilities that we find, but yeah.
Well, as an employee, you have to sort of show that you've achieved certain things during the year. And this is entirely based on your reports, is it?
Well, not entirely on reports. There's a number of feedback from clients. Looking at reports to see how accurate they are. Contributions in other areas like research. But yeah, something, like you say, it's something that's very difficult to kind of get good metrics on.
With GDPR coming up, do you see a lot of companies starting to worry about their incident response plan?
Yeah, definitely. It's something that everybody's got to worry about it. So it's something that we're involved with, helping out lots of clients with.
Do the majority of your clients contact you, or do you contact potential clients to get work?
Both. I mean, a lot of our clients are fairly long-standing, so yeah, I don't know what percentage it is of our work, but a large percentage is for clients that we've had for a long time. So they, back in the day, I don't know where they all came from, but there's a mixture of, we have a sales team that approach clients, and equally, sometimes people approach us, sometimes in a bit of a hurry.
Have you ever been in a situation where you've been a target or someone's been trying to hack you because of your work? Or
Not personally, not as far as I know, but I guess people are probably trying to hack NCC all the time. I mean, we do our own, internal assessments to try and keep things solid. So we've got, like any kind of IT company, we're going to be a target.
With the auditing and compliance kind of tightening up, and I suppose it's related to the data protection regulations and how whether we have to adhere to those with as come out of the European Union. Do you foresee that Pentester will change very much within the next 5 years, and that the low-hanging fruit will be gone? And it should be more like a auditing thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think it'll change that much the next 5 years. Like I said, I mean, I suppose we're finding fewer exciting things than we found 5 or 10 years ago, but there's always going to be a place for pen testing. Increased sort of regulatory requirements mean there might be more consulting around that, but there's still going to things still need to be pen tested.
It's silly potential, but maybe there's more to verify that these aren't there, that you won't find the vulnerabilities because they probably didn't that get in there.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, I suppose so. Depends on the type of client, really.
Do you do pen testing for control systems, like the SCADA system?
A little bit. We do have some guys that do some work in that. I've never had any involvement with it, so I can't really say anything intelligent about it. But yeah, we do a little bit of that.
What's your viewpoint on bug bounty hunting? We get a lot of emails from bounty hunters saying that they found things in our systems. What's your viewpoint? Should we report them?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you don't have, a bug bounty. The idea of a bug bounty is that you sort of publish saying, please come and try and hack us. We have a bug bounty program. If they're just coming to you and sort of blackmailing you, as it were, saying we found a bug, that's not really a bug bounty. So they shouldn't really be doing that. I think overall it's a really good idea. Lots of big companies are doing it and finding, can be quite a cost-effective approach to security if you can, if you can get people to find serious vulnerabilities and get them fixed, then it's certainly worth the money that you have to pay the person who finds it. It's definitely I don't think it's something that's going to go away. But they've got to be well managed, these programs, because for every kind of interesting critical vulnerability that somebody reports, there's 100 people reporting like clickjacking or something pointless or something that's not actually a vulnerability. So there's a lot of sort of sifting through nonsense, I think. Yep. Oh.
Does your company have your own breach and vulnerability disclosure policies, or it depends on the client?
Well, we have our own policies for, if we're doing research or doing work in our own time and we find something, find a vulnerability in some product, then we have our own policy to do with responsible disclosure. If we're finding things on an engagement for a client, then we report that to the client, and it's then up to them what to do with it. There is no kind of response. Our responsibility in that case is to disclose it to the people we're working for, and then there's nothing more to say really. But for our research, we have a policy which I don't know if it's available publicly online. I think it might be, but it's the usual kind of 90 days or whatever, and so on.
You touched a little bit on social engineering. Can you elaborate a bit on that, on what kind of social engineering you do?
Yeah,
What that involves?
can be different things. Sometimes it's phoning people up and just trying to get somebody's password reset. Sometimes it's more kind of physical social engineering, where you're trying to talk your way into a building. We do quite a lot of that. We'll have this sort of agreed scope for a job will be, turn up at this office. Your goal is to, get to this room, or your goal is to plug into the network and see what you can find. And we have a few guys who are very kind of accomplished at that, and they've got all, like I say, I sometimes read the reports and they're pretty good reading. Like there's one, and it does make you a little bit kind of sad in a way, but as somebody who doesn't really work in that, we're slogging away finding what we think are decent vulnerabilities, and then these guys just pitch up to some, and they go, "Oh, hi, we're from head office, and we're here to look at the networks." And they go, "All right, okay," and then just show them in, so why bother with what the rest of us are doing? But yeah, it's really interesting work, and I think there genuinely is more appetite on clients for that, and also for, I don't know if phishing counts as social engineering or not, and phishing is something that can be more can be done at kind of industrial scale. You can automate it in a way, so it's not the same as these guys who are sort of masters of deception, really.
What happens if these guys don't get through at the first attempt? They can't keep on coming back day after day.
They always get through. If they can't, they normally do succeed to some extent, at least. If they can't, then I guess that's it. Game over. Write the report saying we were rumbled, but that's fine. But the clients can be okay. The client typically wants to know how easy it is for somebody to reach their head office or whatever. And if the answer is we couldn't do it, then they'll think great. They shouldn't be sort of disappointed with that. To know. Yeah. I don't have an answer. Don't have an answer to that one.
Do you do any biometric testing for authentication methods? I see us of.
Yep.
Is there a push towards biometrics or
yeah, we do. Again, that's something that's been around for a long time and seemed to die down a little bit, and now it seems to be coming back again. Our research director he's got a strong background in it, and he's actually been on the TV and stuff quite a lot recently talking about biometrics. And we do I worked on an assessment a while ago for a biometric system to do with mobile banking, so it's something we're doing more and more of.
the banks are all of a sudden some of it doesn't look too good?
Yeah, and well, the thing is, it's typically these things, biometric systems can be bypassed. So that means you'd be an idiot to design a system where that was the only thing protecting it. But as one of the factors in a multi-factor authentication system, it can be quite valuable.
How often do clients ask you to remove something from a report, and how do you react when they do? They don't really typically ask us to remove stuff. And if we're kind of, we're an independent security company, and we kind of pride ourselves on that, so we don't. If they ask us to remove a finding, we're not going to just remove a finding because we're asked to. If they ask us, if they give us extra information that makes it clear that something that we've reported is actually not a finding, or perhaps not as serious as we've reported it, then of course we'll adjust it accordingly. But we don't just remove things or add things. But it's not a situation that comes up a lot. The most likely it would be if we are testing a system on behalf of someone else, as it were. So the people that have commissioned the assessment are not the people who are the subject of the assessment, and that's when it's most likely to occur. But it's not something that tends to be a big problem. Okay, I think that's... Oh, one more.
Curiosity box. What is has the new trend of big data be an issue for Pentester?
Not really an issue. We've got a few guys who've got very sort of experienced in testing Hadoop and things like that, so we actually do some jobs testing big data, but it hasn't had any big impact on how we operate. Maybe it will in the future, but yeah.
Do you do any DOS testing?
Yeah, we've got, like, NCC Group has got various sort of units. One of our units do like proper DDoS assessments. So yeah,
but again, I can't speak with any authority on that because those guys take care of it. But they do, proper DDoS assessments. We also have another business unit that do sort of web performance. They're consultants that help people, make their web pages load quicker, basically. So in a normal pen test, we don't do a lot of denial of service tests. We're not even in tests. It's not really what people want from us normally.
Presumably, you have to use test versions of systems and things like that, and take live systems offline.
Yep. Yeah. I think it's the kind of thing that can quite often be. There's well-known methods for taking care of that. So I suppose clients often can look after that for themselves with like things at the edge of their network, or whatever, rather than paying third parties to do it.
How much do companies get affected with ransomware?
A lot, yeah. Our CDO guys do. Yeah, they kind of joke among themselves that pretty much every job they get is ransomware, and I think they're getting a little bit bored of it. But yeah, so many companies getting affected by it. Yeah, it's sad, but yeah. And there's not always a lot. If it's well-written ransomware, there's not a lot that people can, people like us can do to help them. If it's good ransomware, we can help them make sure it doesn't happen again, but we can't sort of dig them out of the hole.
Last questions? No, let's just round of applause for Richard, please.
Thanks.